Good morning everyone. Today we will discuss The Tempest, Act 2, Scene 1, Summary, Critical Appreciation and lines 1 till 20. Now before introducing the scene, let us take a quick recap of what we have learnt in Act 1. The opening scene of the play shows a ship carrying royal passengers caught in a furious storm and is tossing on the waves and is finally wrecked. The royal party is separated on the different part of the islands. We are told how Prospero reached the island along with his daughter Miranda and his past of being the Duke of Milan. We are also introduced to Ariel and Caliban, who are under Prospero's control. We also get to know that Ferdinand and Miranda have seen each other and have fallen in love. So by the end of this video, you will be able to learn the summary and critical appreciation of Act 2 Scene 1, learn the explanation of lines 1 till 20 and learn the references and literary devices used in lines 1 till 20. In this Act 2 Scene 1, we'll read about how Alonso and Antonio, along with Sebastian, have been brought by Ariel on the other part of the island. We'll also come to know how Sebastian is provoked by Antonio to kill Alonso and be the king of Naples. Let us quickly discuss the summary of this scene. A large number of courtiers who survived in the shipwreck are now seen on the island. They are bad-tempered and discouraged. Bad temper means annoyed. Gonzalo tries to cheer up Alonso by telling that they are lucky enough to be saved. Alonso is sad because of the supposed death of his son Ferdinand. In order to cheer him up, Sebastian and Antonio use series of puns making fun of Gonzalo. Now children, what is the meaning of puns? The puns are usually humorous words used in such a way as to suggest two or more of its meanings. So children, a group of passengers including Alonso, Antonio and Sebastian are talking to one another in another part of the island after having been safely brought there by Ariel, a spirit controlled by Prospero. Alonso's son Ferdinand has leapt into the sea in the storm and is thought to be drowned. Gonzalo, one of the courtiers, tries to console Alonso, the king of Naples, who is saddened by the supposed death of his son Ferdinand. But Alonso desires to be left alone. Sebastian and Antonio try to lessen Alonso's sadness by ridiculing Gonzalo. Then Sebastian says that it's all the king's fault for marrying off his daughter to the king of Tunis, causing the need for their long journey. Gonzalo criticizes Sebastian for his lack of sensitivity. Now what is criticizes? It means dispraises. Gonzalo says that if he were the ruler of the island, he would keep it in a completely uncivilized state with no money, commerce, learning, laws, servants, masters, farming, work, technology and weapons. So Sebastian remarks that it is the king's fault for marrying off his daughter to the king of Tunis. Had he not done so, there would have been no need to undertake such a long journey. Gonzalo doesn't relish Sebastian's remarks and he criticizes him for being so insensitive to Alonso. Alonso shows no interest in their conversation, but Gonzalo passes on by saying that if he were the ruler of the island, he would not allow money, commerce, learning, laws, servants, masters, farming, work, technology or weapons. Nothing would be allowed to intrude on its natural state. Its is referring to the island's natural state. As Sebastian and Antonio begin to ridicule his idea, Ariel enters the scene, putting to sleep everyone except Antonio and Sebastian. Now children, what is the meaning of intrude? It means to thrust or force in or upon someone or something, especially without permission. Ridicule, it means to make fun of. So Gonzalo says that he won't let anything intrude into the island. Sebastian and Antonio make fun of his strange vision. Ariel enters the scene and makes everyone except these two sleep. Antonio gives Sebastian the idea of murdering Alonso, his brother, and seizing his kingdom. Thinking Ferdinand is drowned and Alonso's daughter Claribel is far away in Tunis to succeed Alonso, Sebastian realizes he could easily become the next king. He recalls that Antonio similarly overthrew his brother and asks if his conscience bothers him. Let us discuss the meanings, children. Seizing means capturing and bothers means troubles. So Antonio, who is the brother of Prospero, provokes Sebastian to kill his own brother, that is the king of Naples, and seize his kingdom. Sebastian entertains the idea because he thinks that Ferdinand is drowned and Alonso's daughter Claribel is married off to a distant place to the king of Tunis and she won't come. So he could easily become the king. He remembers that Antonio too overthrew his brother and asks him if Antonio's conscience pricks him. Antonio says, I feel not this deity in my bosom. They agree to draw their swords, one to kill Alonso and the other Gonzalo. They judge the other men will be docile enough to go along with their new rulers. But Ariel awakens Gonzalo, who wakes up the others with a shout, and they all see the two standing in their midst with their weapons out. Let us discuss the meanings, children. Deity means goddess. Bosom, chest. Docile, easily led. Now Antonio answers that his conscience never bothers him. They agree to execute their plan. Which plan? Plan of killing Alonso and Gonzalo. They decide to take out their swords and kill Alonso and Gonzalo. They know that the others, which are other courtiers, will be easily led, so they won't be a danger at all. In the meantime, Ariel awakens Gonzalo, who rouses others with a shout. All get up and see the two, Sebastian and Antonio, standing with their swords out. They are surprised to see Antonio and Sebastian in their midst with their swords drawn. Sebastian comes out with an excuse that he had heard a roar at a distance and had mistaken it for the sound of lions. The two had drawn their swords merely to protect themselves. Now everyone gets surprised on seeing Antonio and Sebastian. Sebastian gives a lame excuse by saying that a roar in the distance made them take out their swords. The roar of the animal at the distant place frightens the courtiers as well. They say that they have drawn their swords merely to protect themselves. The entire party decides to leave the spot to avoid the approaching lions. Moreover, they still have the task of looking for Ferdinand. As they depart, Ariel leaves too, so that he can give Prospero the latest news. Now the roar of the animal at the distant place frightens the courtiers, of course, and forces them to move away from that spot to another part of the island in search of Alonso's son Ferdinand. The entire party leaves and Ariel leaves too, as he wants to give this news to Prospero. Let us quickly discuss the critical appreciation. The major portion of this scene is devoted to courtly humor, through which different characters like Gonzalo, Antonio, and Sebastian are depicted. Shakespeare's audience was delighted by witty wordplay, which was appreciated mainly by educated upper classes. Let us discuss the meanings, children. Courtly, of a quality befitting court. Witty, having good intellectual capacity. So, children, in this scene, Gonzalo, Antonio, and Sebastian involve themselves in a witty and humorous conversation. It was done so because Shakespeare's audience loved the witty wordplay, which was mainly appreciated by the upper classes. Negative characters. Antonio and Sebastian are negative characters. They express their cynical feelings in a series of puns aimed at Gonzalo, whose persistent good humor irritates them. For every positive word uttered by Gonzalo, Antonio offers a negative remark and Sebastian follows it up with another. The children Antonio and Sebastian strike negative notes in their comments. From their remarks, we come to know that Gonzalo is an honest and good person who looks on the bright side of the things. He is happy just to be alive. Whereas Antonio is cynical and deceitful. So cynical is peevish. He is peevish and deceitful. He is always planning to manipulate things in his favor. Sebastian is also a cynic. He lacks moral strength and Antonio's initiative. Thus, he is always ready to follow Antonio. Even more significant is the plot hatched by Antonio and Sebastian, while the others are charmed asleep, to murder Alonso and Gonzalo and take over Naples. It is Antonio who initiates the plot to murder Alonso by putting the idea into Sebastian's head. He suggests that since Ferdinand is drowned and Claribel, the daughter, is far away in Tunis, Sebastian is the next rightful heir to Alonso's throne. So let us discuss the meanings. Initiates, begins. Heir, one who is entitled to inherit property. So the scene reveals the plot hatched by Antonio and Sebastian to murder Alonso and Gonzalo. In fact, it is Antonio who initiates this plot and provokes Sebastian to murder Alonso. Sebastian entertains this idea because he thinks that as Ferdinand is drowned and Alonso's daughter Claribel is married off to a distant place, and hence he could easily become the king. When Sebastian asks whether Antonio himself felt any remorse after similarly overthrowing his brother Prospero, Antonio replies that he has never found his conscience to cause him any pain. So Sebastian recollects that Antonio too overthrew his brother and asks him if his conscience pricks him. Antonio answers that his conscience never bothers him. It never causes any remorse. So children, what is remorse? Remorse is regret or guilt. Contrasting characters. A further example of the contrasting characters of these three is shown up in their reaction to Gonzalo's description of utopia, or the ideal state that he visualizes for the island. Gonzalo says he would ban every element of civilized society and keep the island in an unspoiled condition. So children, Gonzalo gives his idea of the Commonwealth. Commonwealth here, it is utopia, an ideal state. Gonzalo says that if he were to be the king of the island, he will try to establish a unique society. In his ideal Commonwealth, there will be no need to do any trade or no need of any literature. This vision has no impact on Sebastian and Antonio, who are the products of completely man-made world of the court and city. Instead of considering the possibilities such a state might offer, they begin to pinpoint its logical inconsistencies. For instance, Gonzalo has said if he were the king, he would set up a state where there were no king. But in reality, he himself would be the head of the idealized state. Their comments further show that their cleverness is always used to criticize others. Children, what is the meaning of inconsistencies? It means uncertainties. Now, according to Gonzalo, in this state, nature herself would provide everything that is needed. No one will have the need to work or toil for anything. Now, Antonio and Sebastian make fun of Gonzalo's ideas as they are completely the product of man-made world, the court and the city. They make fun of Gonzalo as he says in his kingdom there would be no king. But he forgets that he began his speech saying that if he were the king of the island. So this actually tells us that these two characters only show their cleverness to criticize others. The idea of unspoiled state. The idea of a completely unspoiled state proposed by Gonzalo is borrowed from the French philosopher Michel Montaigne. In one of his essays of Cannibals, Montaigne contrasts the natural life of savages found in the New World with the civilized Europeans living in the Old World. Now children, what is the meaning of savages? Means wild or uncultivated. So this idea of commonwealth or unspoiled state as spoken by Gonzalo was basically borrowed from the French philosopher Michel Montaigne. In his essay of Cannibals, he compares the natural life of wild or uncultivated savages in the New World to the civilized Europeans living in the Old World. This essay makes the radical suggestion that civilization is an artificial and corrupting force, while the natural way of life of native people makes them much stronger and healthier, an idea which later came to be known as the theory of the noble savage. Now children, what is the meaning of radical? It means a basic principle. So he concludes that civilization is an artificial corrupting force, whereas the lives of natives make them stronger and healthier. This theory was later known as noble savage. The idea that natural is better than the artificial has been passed down in many different forms in this century and survives in the Back to the Land movement that began in 1960s. The attraction of organic fruit and vegetables, the development of renewable forms of energy, and conservation of wilderness are other contemporary expressions of the same basic idea. So children, what is the meaning of contemporary? It means current or modern. So in 1960s, Back to the Land movement initiated. It also believed in the idea that the natural is better than the artificial. The attraction to organic fruit and vegetables, the development of renewable forms of energy, and the conservation of wilderness are other forms of the same basic idea. The idea, as Gonzalo describes it, free of labor and money, masters and slaves, farming and fighting, is dismissed by Antonio and Sebastian. If everyone were as harmless and good-natured as Gonzalo, such an idealized situation could exist. But it is individuals such as the other two. Who are the two? Antonio and Sebastian, who prey on others for their own advancement that make it impossible to attain. So now Gonzalo is in his commonwealth idea talks of being free of labor, money, masters, slaves, farming and fighting. This idea of his is mocked at by both Antonio and Sebastian. Now children, if everyone were as harmless and as good-natured as Gonzalo was, then only such an idealized situation could exist. But people like Sebastian and Antonio who pick on others also exist. Such people make such ideal situation impossible to be attained. Caliban is another example against the supremacy of the natural state and the possibility of attaining a society unspoiled by any hint of civilization. Now children, what is the meaning of supremacy? Means the quality or the state of being supreme. So the next such example against the supremacy of natural state is Caliban, who is far away from the possibility of attaining a society unspoiled or untouched by any hint of civilization. Let us now discuss the lines 1 till 20. Enter Alonso, Sebastian, Antonio, Gonzalo, Adrian, Francisco, and others. Gonzalo to Alonso. Beseech you, sir, be merry. You have cause, so have we all, of joy, for our escape is much beyond our loss. Our hint of woe is common. Now children, let us discuss the meanings. Beseech means request. Cause, reason. Woe, misery. So Alonso, Sebastian, Antonio, Gonzalo, Adrian, Francisco and other courtiers enter on another part of the island. Gonzalo requests Alonso to be cheerful. He says that Alonso has a reason to be joyful, as all of them have, for the benefit of their escape is above all their losses. He says that their cause of sorrow is a common one. Every day some sailor's wife, the masters of some merchant and the merchant have just our theme of woe. But for the miracle, I mean our preservation, few in millions can speak like us. Then wisely, good sir, weigh our sorrow with our comfort. Let us discuss the meanings, children. The masters of some merchant. Here, the owners of some merchant ship. Now here the ship is spoken as a merchant. So this is a ship. And the merchant. So the merchant who loses his cargo while the owners lose their ship. So Gonzalo further says that every day some sailor's wife, the captain of some merchant ship and the merchant himself have just the same reason for sorrow. But as for this miracle, he means their being saved. Few out of millions can speak of such an experience. So he tells Alonso that he must be sensible and balance their good fortune against his grief. Let us read the gist of the lines. Alonso, Sebastian, Antonio, Gonzalo, Adrian, Francisco and others enter. Gonzalo requests Alonso to cheer up. He says that like all of them, Alonso also has a good reason to be happy. The fact that they are alive outweighs their losses. Many people every day feel the sadness that they are feeling now. Every day some sailor's wife, a ship's crew, the merchant who hired the ship, all experience the same loss that they themselves have undergone. But the miracle, the fact that they were saved, only happens to a few people out of millions. He requests Alonso to remember that and take comfort to it, to counterbalance their sadness. Let us discuss the next lines. Alonso, Prithee, peace. Sebastian to Antonio, he receives comfort like cold porridge. Antonio to Sebastian, the visitor will not give him over so. Sebastian, look, he is winding up the watch of his wit. By and by it will strike. Let us discuss the meanings and literary devices. Prithee means pray you. Like cold porridge is simile. The visitor, sarcastic humor. Look, he is winding up the watch of his wit. Just as a man winds up his watch, so is Gonzalo gathering up all the resources of his intellect to strike into speech. Alonso requests Gonzalo to be quiet. Sebastian comments that the consolation which Gonzalo is offering to Alonso is as distasteful to him as cold porridge. Now, like cold porridge, we have done it is a simile. So, children, the Scottish dish of oatmeal porridge requires above all things that it is to be served hot. When once it is cold, it becomes an unappetizing and clammy mass. Hence, it is taken as a type of something disagreeable and unwelcome. So, the consolation was unwelcome to Alonso. Antonio further says that Alonso's comforter, Gonzalo, will not leave him alone. Now, children, you can see the visitor here. It is a sarcastic humor. Now, Antonio speaks as if Gonzalo were a charitable visitor who had come to help the sick and ailing as missionaries and fashionable ladies sometimes do in poverty-stricken states. So, the words are spoken in sarcastic humor. Sebastian says that Gonzalo is getting his tongue ready and he will soon strike like a clock. That means after gathering all the resources of his intelligence, he will speak. Let us now read the gist of the lines. Alonso requests Gonzalo to say no more. Sebastian then tells Antonio that Alonso enjoys the comforting words of Gonzalo as much as cold porridge. Antonio replies to Sebastian that the goodwill ambassador, that is Gonzalo, won't give up that easily. Sebastian says to Antonio to look as Gonzalo is like a clock winding up to strike the hour. Gonzalo to Alonso. Sir. Sebastian to Antonio. 1. Tell. Gonzalo. When every grief is entertained, that's offered, comes to the entertainer. So here a pun has been used. So Gonzalo says, Sir, but before he could say further, Sebastian says to Antonio, there he begins again. Let us all count. Then Gonzalo completes his sentence and says that when every grief is cherished, then it comes to the person who is cherishing it. Gonzalo had meant the person who entertains the grief, that is, the sufferer. But Sebastian takes the word as meaning the person who gives entertainment or amusement. Sebastian, $1. Gonzalo, dollar comes to him indeed. You have spoken truer than you purposed. Now children, with the word $1, again a pun has been used. Dollar, it means grief. And purposed, it means intended. He says $1. And Gonzalo answers Sebastian and says dollar or grief does come to him, and Sebastian has spoken more truly than he had intended to. Basically, Sebastian says $1 to be staked, and Gonzalo takes the word dollar as grief. That means Sebastian says that such a person as Gonzalo should be rewarded with $1. Since dollar sounds the same as dollar, meaning grief, Gonzalo takes up the second sense, that is the sense of grief. Gonzalo addresses Alonso as Sir. On the other side, Sebastian says to Antonio that Gonzalo begins again, so they should start counting. Gonzalo says that if we let every sad thing happen to us to get us down, then the grief comes to the person who is cherishing it. Sebastian stakes $1. Gonzalo says the dollar or grief comes to him. He tells Sebastian that he thought he was being funny, but he has said the truth. So children, that is all for the day today. And for your homework, you will do extract number 1 of Act 2, Scene 1 on the workbook with pencil. Thank you.